Hello, everyone. I should find a better greeting than hello, everyone, because it's both unnatural and kind of lame. And so today we lost. Everyone. I should find a better greeting. So I don't know what's going on there. Today we lost everyone. Okay, now I'm echoing. Okay, can you hear me now, or am I echoing still? Okay. Okay. I'm trying to figure out why. Okay, so now it's great to have you guys here. Yesterday was a very sad day. We lost the last great senator in America, is what I'm going to say. They called Robert Byrd that. We should do an episode about Robert Byrd one of these days because he's a complicated figure. It's complicated, but Senator Mike Gravel, who I've had the privilege of interviewing twice, was instrumental in ending the Vietnam War. So we have an episode in Historically podcast called The Pentagon Papers, and we're going to put the link in the description box below. Check that out. You'll learn about the whole thing. But what happened was that okay, so I don't know where to start, even with the Vietnam War. So let's start with Robert McNamara, who was both Kennedy and Johnson's Secretary of something, either State or Defense. And he had the brilliant, he was an automotive person. He was the CEO of one of the top three. And he had the brilliant idea of incentivizing, of figuring out whether or not the Vietnam War is useful by using the metric called the kill count, as in how many enemy soldiers you kill. Of course, things deteriorated, and in the Vietnam War, like soldiers in America were like eventually trading ears for beers. And check out our video about that. But the Pentagon did a study where on Vietnam War, and the study basically said that it is impossible to win the Vietnam War, no matter how much you, basically, no matter how much you tried. And the thing was that on top of it, it gave, like, I don't know how to explain it. It said top secret and sensitive, and it also revealed a lot of disgusting war crimes. For example, one thing from the Pentagon Papers is that they claimed that it's only useful to contain China, and but China, it's just disgusting. Anyways, the Supreme. Okay, so there was also this section that that talked about basically their strategy of counterinsurgency was just like murdering everyone. And then this guy named Daniel Ellsberg basically looked at the study, and he thought the American people needed to know. Well, the Supreme Court put a gag order on him, and it said that they can't publish the Pentagon Papers. So what Senator Gravel did was that, you know, that everything that happens in the Senate is immune. So you cannot prosecute a senator for what he does in the Senate. So he read the Pentagon Papers into the record, and he basically went for about 5 hours, and then the end he decided to he listen to our interview. But this is some excerpts that we were able to find from his 3 to 5 hour long. It went to them at midnight. Like, here he cries, Okay, sorry. He read for 20 straight hours. This is the last three excerpts from the last 3 hours. Thank you, Andrew Saturn. I apologize. I was wrong. Until 3 a.m. Yes, this is the end. So that's the first thing we're going to show today. Afterwards, we will listen to what Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger had to say about Senator Gravel. And finally, we will look at what Senator Gravel wanted us to do in the future and listen to my last interview with him, where he says that he trusts the only people he trusts is you, the American people, and we need to give power back to you. So let's start with the Pentagon Papers. And then I'll be back live right after that. And then share this with your friends, families, enemies, and everyone, because he was a great senator.
Political strength grew. His relations, quote, follows. The greatest criminals, black marketeers, and grand-scale dope pushers. I could do it tomorrow, I could do it next week, I could do it the week after. And I could maybe just hang on to the documents and never do anything about it and just sit by and let time go on. But the thing that I'm overpowered with, totally overpowered with, is the fact that this very moment we're killing people in Vietnam with our tax dollars as a result of our... When I came into possession of these papers, I looked around, and nobody in government had done anything. The only thing that was being done in government was an effort to stifle and hide this stuff. And it just dawned on me that somebody, if we're going to have any faith at all in our institutions, somebody from government's got to have the same resolve, the same feelings for stopping the killing as Ellsberg did, as the Post did, as the New York Times did, as the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, as all these journals. I only myself, because the people who released this were bureaucrats. You know, bureaucrats, the people that we disparage so often. They weren't elected officials, they were bureaucrats. And they have much less risk than I have. The risk that I have is being expulsed from the Senate. So many press people sitting at this side of the table that I think things have changed with the media, the Fourth Estate. I think probably since the activities of the New York Times and the Washington Post and a few others that there's developed a certain arrogance. I don't know. We're developing as we go. That I could find. Yes, that's the reason why I'm using this vehicle. But I'm not immune to censure or expulsion. Back to order. Congressman, I want to thank you very, very personally and state in a very unusual fashion something that should be noted for history. That is that the first time you and I met was when we, a few hours ago, shook hands at this witness table. I am acquainted with your record. I know that you were one of the early ones back in May of 1965 to oppose our involvement in Vietnam. I know what that opposition has cost you as a person to this committee.
Take the time to focus on me for a second. I have to say that I have been seriously concerned about American involvement in Vietnam from the very beginning. I think it was dead wrong, and I think those of us who felt that way at that time have been vindicated. I guess that's about all I can say. I'm not trying to crow or anything. I'm not trying to say I told you so. But I think if we've had this conviction, such as you and I hold, I think we've got to keep on. We've got to keep up the...
And I repeat again, what's wrong with this nation, and what's at issue at this particular point in our history, is not the fact that the American people have lost faith and trust in its leaders, but the very simple fact that over the last 20 years, up to today, the American leadership has not demonstrated, has not had the faith and trust in the American people. And had that faith and trust and straightforwardness been present, this nation would not be in the mess it's in today. And these papers that I'm reading bring that case out more clearly than I could ever write it. The Pentagon, it's in 3 tiers. I'm reading summaries of narratives. The narratives are based upon the documents themselves. Congressman, if you'll permit me, I'll continue to read.
I'd like to
this summary.
I'd just like to offer one sentence, Senator, and that is, if the...
Backed by the United States, DM refused, and I think these are important lines, backed by the United States, DM refused to open consultation with the North Vietnamese concerning general elections when the date for these fell due in July 1955. Pressing his military advantage against the Sex, he moved to consolidate his position existing economic and financial agreements with France, and called upon France to denounce the Genevers of the Geneva Accords and pursued an international and domestic policy of anti-communism. Both Vietnams took the view that temporary, but statements could not gainsay the practical import of the
How many pages were you given?
No, but I've got, that's all in this. That's being released tonight. We're releasing all this stuff to the press tonight.
What is it?
You'll have all the Kennedy stuff tonight that's coming out right now. We apparently, now, just please, let me go through it again. Apparently my staff, under my instructions, has negotiated with the three wire services to give you copies of these. When I made the motion to put it in the record, and we're getting some more language so that I can get the record proper, that automatically, we think, authorized me to go ahead and do this. So you'll be getting these three documents before the night's done. I tried to do that on the Senate floor. I was but I don't know how long this will last, so I'm going to try and get as many documents out as I can this evening.
Why did you decide to do it this way?
Because, as I view the situation, what happened, somebody released this information. I don't know who. I read the newspapers like the rest of you and watch TV, and they say it's Daniel Ellsberg, and he apparently has confessed. I think he's done a service to this country. He's all alone out there, and I think he's going to have an effect in ending this war. And I think the courage of the newspapers to print what they did in the face of the dangers that they face, economically and personally, the executives of these newspapers, I think is one of the great that I run.
What about censure?
Well, that's less.
Why do you...
Expulsion is worse than censure.
Senator, what makes you think that you're liable to be expelled from the Senate for this?
Well, I think you will judge those events as it goes on.
But why did you decide to do it this way in this
because as I understand my legal rights as a United States Senator, by convening this committee, I am still immune under other facets of the law that have not made other people immune.
Why didn't you do it tomorrow morning? Why didn't you...
I felt that I had to do it sometime.
Senator,
let me just finish that one thought. And I don't understand, as a human being with my mind, that Stu Symington called. Very simply, that the chief executive of this country probably spent anywhere from $50 to $120 million without Congress knowing about it. Now, Stu Symington, mind you, sits on that special committee that's supposed to watch the CIA. Now, that the chief executive of this country did that, hired thousands of people in one country, moved them to another country, and then waged a war at the border of China without anybody knowing about it in Congress or the people. Now, supposing the Chinese people, the Chinese government decided to invade as a result of that provocation, then what would the public record be? That obviously they attacked our troops. And then the documents, because you get lost in the nitty-gritty, you get lost in the incidentals of the day. And it's much more important.
Now the documents, you mean the cables?
Oh yeah, you get carried away. There's thousands.
Do you have them?
Pardon me?
Do you have these cables?
Oh yes. And I spent hours reading them. And all I come away with is just with the gargantuan size of reading it. And so I could spend the next year reading it. I could spend the next 10 years reading this stuff. But what counts is that somebody at the Pentagon performed a study, brought all these documents together, narrated all the documents, interrelated it, and this is a long narrative. And then on top of that, so that people in the subcommittee on buildings and grounds, it's the only chairmanship that I have, and I treasure it dearly.
Senator, are you concerned that any legal effort might be made to stop you from making these documents public?
I think that concern is obviously there, otherwise I wouldn't have what I consider some of the finest constitutional lawyers working for me to help guide me in my decision-making process.
Well, obviously these fine constitutional lawyers didn't come in the buildings and grounds. Where'd you get them?
They're kind enough to volunteer.
Are the Vietnam veterans...
They're retained by me.
The
Vietnam veterans, we share a same cause. And that is that they want to end the war, and I want to end the war. The information to read them would have been right on the floor of that chamber, but I was denied that right by the Republican minority whip, Robert Griffin.
Senator, have your legal experts told you that you're safe from any prosecution or injunction as long as you read these in your function as a subcommittee chairman?
That's a question yet to be decided.
Senator, do you have any hopes of this affecting
what they've told me is that's a question yet to be decided.
That there is some possibility you could still be enjoined legally.
Yes. Let me state again, I'm not an attorney. I have no background in constitutional law, and we're just developing this in our government. Concurrently, the United States began to channel aid directly to South Vietnam, rather than through France. The counter-revolution of French policy then thrust upon the U.S. a choice between supporting Diem or the French presence in Indochina. The U.S. opted for Diem. By the time the deadlines for election consultations fell due in July 1950, are extremely vague. But at one point they are clear in stipulating that the elections are to be free. Everything will not, as is often alleged, connive with Diem to ignore the elections. Geneva Accords and his opposition to pre-election consultations were at his own initiative. However, the U.S., which had expected elections to be held, and up until May of 1955 had fully supported them, shifted its position in the face of Diem's opposition and of the evidence that
Dulles said that we did not support the Geneva Accords.
To put this together and deal just in the summary words itself. This is the summary itself, and I would have to reread the papers and reevaluate them and to say categorically that that's correct. It's my impression, reading it from this, that that is correct.
Because the United States took a position in support of the Geneva Convention. While we were not a signatory, we said, indicated in a separate statement that we supported the Geneva Convention, as I recall it.
As has been stated before, Congressman, of course, this is only one
adherence.
In fact, about an accommodation.
In other words, it wasn't a massacre of South Vietnamese.
Not at all. Congressman, I'd like to impose and get into this record also, and I'll stop at this point in time, to read the statement I would have read on the floor of the United States Senate had I been permitted to read that statement on the floor of the United States Senate. But I was denied the right that I naively thought all senators had. And I must say the reason why I was denied that right was because of my naivete. Because obviously, through Senate, stopped me from reading. Mr. President, can anyone doubt that Can anyone doubt that these are agonizing times for America? Can anyone doubt that this nation is being torn apart by a war that sears its conscience? A terrible shadow of suspicion is across the land. Suspicion that we have made a terrible mistake, that we have spent lives and wealth in pursuit of an unworthy goal. Suspicion that government has not been, influence must be preserved. Preserved so that Southeast Asia would not have a communist government. We supported the French with American tax dollars to such an extent that by the war's peak, Americans were paying 80% of the total cost of the French war, not the American war. That was a policy endorsed by American leaders as a means of halting the spread of communism without expending American lives. Virtually without exception, American leaders have built upon those policy origins, provide boldly through the doors that connect this chamber with the outside world. And I was referring in this paper to the Senate chamber, and now I refer to this committee chamber. And the committee system is part of Senate procedures and House procedures and congressional procedures. and I'm proud to be sitting here as a committee chairman of a humble committee, and proud to have before me what I think is a great American, a congressman from New York. I did not seek these papers. When they were offered, I accepted them. I have reviewed the papers in my possession and read much of the material. It is a remarkable work, to say the least. Remarkable for what it says about those chiefly responsible for managing our efforts in Southeast Asia in 1967. They flow from full possession of the facts. They knew that we would achieve no worthy goal and reap only the consequences. The study was tonight, right now. We have these documents. We have them under the most stringent circumstances imaginable. Mr. President, Mr. Congressman, there is the people must know the full story of what has occurred over the past 20 years within their government. The story is a terrible one. It is replete with duplicity, connivance against the public and public officials. I know of nothing in our history to equal it for extent of failure and extent of loss in all aspects of the term. We can people, human beings, are being killed as I speak to you tonight, killed as a direct result of policy decisions we as a body have made. Arms are being severed. Metal is crashing through human bodies because of a public policy. This government one may respond that we made such a sacrifice to preserve freedom and liberty in Southeast Asia. One may respond that we sacrifice ourselves on the continent of Asia so that we will not have to fight a similar war on the shores of America. One can make these arguments only if he has failed to read the Pentagon Papers. That is the terrible truth of it all. The papers do not support our public statements. The papers do not support our best intentions. The papers prove that for 20 years, and certainly for the last 10 years, we have been
express admiration for your courage, sir, and you're certainly one individual who hasn't knuckled under to the institutions and the regimentation that have become so great and so ominous in our society. I have one comment to make about your presentation today, and that is that for most of us who have followed the events in Southeast Asia over the past 20 years, the Executive Department has itself made...
Congressman, again, I want to thank you on behalf of myself and the American people. Let me just say that a subcommittee
apparently we got notification that there is some kind of Twitter warrior who disapproves of our tribute to Mike Gravel. Well, I just wanted to say that this is what, according to the Nixon tapes, what Nixon and Henry Kissinger said about Mike Gravel reading out the Pentagon Papers. So it's going to be like a quick conversation, and you'll know who's Nixon and who's Kissinger. It'll just be a few minutes before we finish with our interview. No, there is no copyright violation because the Nixon tapes cannot.
Goddamn New York Times expose of the most highly classified documents of the war.
Oh, that. I see. I didn't read the story, but you mean that was leaked out of the Pentagon?
Sir, the whole study that was done for McNamara and then carried on after McNamara left by Clifford and the peaceniks over there. This is a devastating security breach of the greatest magnitude of anything I've ever seen.
Well, what's being done about it then? I mean, I didn't... did we know this was coming out?
No, we did not, sir.
What is your advice on that Times thing, John? You would like to do it?
I would believe so, Mr. President. Otherwise, we will look a little foolish in not following through on our legal obligations. And
has this ever been done before?
Publication like this, or
no. Has the government ever done this to a paper before?
Oh yes, advising of their. Oh, yes, we've done this before.
Have we? All right.
Yes, sir. I would think that.
How do you go about it? You do it sort of low key.
Low key. You call them and then send a telegram to confirm it.
Mm-hmm. And say that we're examining the situation and we just simply are putting you on notice.
Well, we're putting them on notice that they're violating a statute because we have a communication from Mel Laird as to the nature of the documents, and they fall within a statute. Now, I don't know whether you've been noticed it, but this thing was Mel was working.
Henry's on the other. He just walked in. I'll put him on the other line. Go ahead.
Mel had a pretty good go up there before the committee today on it, and it's all over town and all over everything, and I think we'd look a little silly if we just didn't take this low-key action of advising them about the publication.
Did Mel take a fairly hard line on it?
Yes, he gave a legal opinion, and it was a violation of the law, which of course puts us at where we have to get...
Well, look, as far as the Times is concerned, hell, they're our enemies. I think we just ought to do it. And anyway, Henry, tell them what you just heard from Rostow.
Well, Rostow called on behalf of Johnson, and he said that it is Johnson's strong view that this is an attack on the whole integrity of government, that if whole file cabinets can be stolen and then made available to the press, you can't have orderly government anymore.
Okay, ready. Hi, everyone. This is an exhausting day. I had a wardrobe malfunction just right now, so we had to take a little bit of a quick standby mode. Apparently, I don't have sound. Okay. Somebody said, okay, how many? Okay, somebody said, never mind. Okay. Hello, everyone. We have had a wardrobe, whatever we had. Don't worry about it. So, as you can see, Kissinger called this a threat to the entire state apparatus. So, I think that he has done a lot of good just by releasing these papers, because as Parenti would say, it helps us understand the gangster nature of our state. Now, this was the last interview I did with him. It was last October, and it was for a CPUSA event, Communist Party USA. He was unveiling his new book, and I ask you to look for similarities between his idea and Lenin's idea of the Soviets. And with that, we're going to just say, well, let me see if I can play this song and have you guys hear it. I know what I can do. We will have a drink for Senator Gravel right now, even though I don't have any alcohol with me because I don't drink usually. But let's see if you can hear this song while we have a drink for Senator Mike Gravel. And then watch the interview. It is very warming. It will warm up your heart, because what he says is 100% right. You can't trust Congress. You can't trust the Senate. You can't trust anyone. You need to trust the American people. So with that. Should give you a hint who Senator Gravel will be spending some time in heaven with. So yeah, I also pissed off a lot of libs with my Photoshop of Senator Gravel in heaven with Gaddafi, Mao, Stalin, and I believe I had somebody else. So yes, scotch is good. Let's all drink some scotch or iced tea because I don't have any alcohol because I'm stupid. I'm nerdy. And yeah, and with that, there's also one more thing. Check out my TikTok at the end where I'm gonna put it up. I haven't put this up yet, but this was one of my favorite moments where he says, the only thing worse than soldiers dying in vain is more soldiers dying in vain. And he calls everyone, and he was so, with that spirit in mind, we should work to end war. And you'll realize if in order to end war and be against imperialism, you have to be against capitalism, because imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism. And with that, please enjoy this interview and cherry up. Apparently somebody thinks I should toast with cherry 7-Up. Okay, I will remember that for next time. And with that, we will say that he will surely be missed. Tell me when we're off. Right. Okay. So our next guest is a senator from Alaska.
He is known for putting the Pentagon Papers in the public. He did one of the longest filibusters against the war. He is probably the last great anti-imperialist senators. I mean, and so with no further ado, I introduce Senator Mike Gravel.
Thank you. How do I get this? Okay. Thank you very much. I must say that you're right. I'm probably the last at 90 years old. I don't obviously have that much to look forward to. I was very impressed with Aaron's monologue, very much so. I really found him to be a very, very bright person and knowledgeable person and articulate person. I wish we had him full time pushing for the National Citizens Initiative, which has been recast as a legislature of the people. I have a book coming out, just be another week or so, because I did a republication of it. It's called The Failure of Representative Government and the Solution. The failure is self-evident. Just look around, everything is screwed up. And I must tell you that today I am very pessimistic as a result of the results of the election that took place yesterday. When you have half the electorate that really are acting as dumb as fence posts, it's just very discouraging that you'll see something happen. My view, taking off on what Aaron was talking about, was I'd like to empower people to be able to make laws. Lawmaking is the center, the core of civilization, the core of any fine government. And so until that happens, I have no optimistic view of the planetary community because of the threat of nuclear activity, which is sustained by the liberal interventionists, by the conservatives, and the inability of representative government globally to get a handle on global warming. And so I question whether or not we as the human race can survive the 21st century. If we do, we're lucky, but it will be short-lived after that. I would be interested to know if there's any possibility of you're taking an interest in empowering the people to make laws. Whenever people talk about dealing with solutions, whether culturally or politically or spiritually, they fail to come to the solution that is really in their face. And that solution is to recognize that there's only two venues for change. One is the government, which isn't going to do anything because if they did something, it would disturb the power controlled by the elites. And the other is, of course, the people. And they were disenfranchised by the framers of the Constitution, which I take to task extensively in the book. We honor and deify the Constitution. It's all false. It is truly false. The Constitution is nothing but a device to maintain the status quo in the hands of the elites. Now, what we really have to focus on is the Declaration of Independence, because it's all said there, and that is that the people are the source of government, that the people have a right to make laws and change their government. And so, but none of that is taken to task because the Constitution slipped in 11 years later and slipped in at the hands of the slavers. who perpetuated slavery in the Constitution for perpetuity, that it was taken out by a civil war, only meant that it was so tightly embedded in the structure of government that it took a civil war. But the Civil War didn't really address the problem because we had 90 years of Jim Crowism after that. And after that, we had the Voting Rights Act in the 60s. And now we have the Black Lives Matter. Here, Black Lives Matter and the activities of others, unless they have the ability to make laws, their enthusiasm will evaporate. And that will leave us exactly where we're at, which is a group of racists who continue to try to control society with its horrible, horrible tactics. So that's just to put a touch on it. I'd be happy to respond to any questions. It's a lot easier for me to do that other than ramble on. Go ahead, please.
Okay, the first thing I wanted to say is that you have a lot of fans. People said, "We love you, Mike. Thank you so much." I'm fangirling. But and I agree with you on the having more citizen participation. And I'm just waiting for the questions. So somebody's typing the questions. So
it's more than participation now. Participation, you could go protest in the streets and you're participating in a cause. No, what this is taking up the power that you have as a human being, as a sovereign, to be able to make laws. You have that power. And so unless, and that's where I'm failing, I've been at this for 30 years and I've not been able to convince any sizable constituency. But I put this whole thing into a book called The Failure of Representative Government and a Solution. And on the back cover, it has the manual to create and operate a legislature of the people. And at the bottom, I made a discovery recently, and I put this at the bottom because of my biography, because this represents exactly who I am. And that is, the world is my country. To do good is my religion. And I'm copying Thomas Paine. The world is my country, and to do good is my religion. To me, that says it all. But so my hope is, and of course, the young kids that you're talking about, they're the ones that are running the Gravel Institute. I'm not. I just my wife, who's considerably younger than I am, monitors it, and we cover it that way. But if it weren't for the kids, I would be in a situation of unknown, and I would be putting out as my legacy this book, The Failure of Representative Government. So what David Oakes and Henry Williams and others are doing are trying to maintain what visibility I have or can handle. And that's fine. Is it going to be enough? I don't know. But I do know that they're committed to the concept that the people should be empowered to make laws. That's where the answer is. Now, people will say, well, my God, if we turn around and give the people the right to make laws, they'll go crazy. No, the people that are going crazy are the elites of our society today. That's who's crazy. Empowering the people to make laws in a deliberative fashion. If you just gave them the power to make laws, it would be anarchy. It has to be done in a deliberative fashion. That's the reason why the package that I put forth as a solution is an amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which is a citizens amendment, and to a Legislative Procedures Act, whereby the procedures, the legislative activities of the citizens will be conducted in a very deliberative process. So it's all there in the book. Book's not over, a little over 100 pages, can be read in one sitting. Will it catch on? I don't know. but I've done as much as I can. It took me 25 to 30 years to figure out the solution, and that's the people properly equipped to make laws. Without being properly equipped, it's just anarchy and revolt, revolutionary activity in the streets.
I agree, because right now people who are making our laws are lobbyists for the Koch brothers, and they're making horrific laws.
More than the Koch brothers, the end of this is what's being done on behalf of the military-industrial complex. There's a recent book out by Professor Vine. It's the United States of War. And he points out that from the beginning of our society in the United States, we've only had 17 days of peace where we weren't at war with somebody. Now, keep in mind, that's from the colonial period to the present day. We've really only had 17 days of peace. We Americans are violent, truly, truly violent and cruel. When you can get away from separating children and putting them in cages, that's a society that is basically cruel and violent. I'm embarrassed to admit this, but that is the United States of America.
Well, one thing for me, I really remember from your 2008 run is talking about how it's legal to have a nuclear first strike, and that shocked me. Like, I did not know that. Can you talk about that?
It's still the policy today. And to my knowledge, we are the only nuclear power that has the first strike policy. And when you hear generals and admirals talking about this policy flippantly, this is no big deal. We just want to scare everybody to death. And if they don't get scared enough and shut up and do what we're told, we're telling you, we'll visit them with a first strike. Today, what I'm so pessimistic about, both in our foreign policy and the attitude of American people, is that if you want to look at who's the dangerous party on the planet, you just look who's spending the money on defense. That China has maybe 350 nukes. We have 6,500. Who's the dangerous party? Russia is parity, but they want to hang on to these various agreements to keep a lid on this. So they're not about. One of the things we Americans fail to do when they say, "Oh, there's a threat here, there's a threat there." What's the threat? Why? Why would anybody think of attacking us? We could obliterate anybody on Earth, and probably will at some point. And so now the question becomes, if you can't answer the why, then what's the purpose of arming ourselves to the teeth? We have a situation that I view very comparably to the situation that existed in the decade before 1914. And that is when you build so many arms and you have so many people invested in their use, there's no question there'll be something that will happen that will set the spark off, as what happened with the assassination in Sarajevo. And that scenario, for me, is very real. And it frightens me to death. And what's very sad is that, I'm not the one that's going to suffer these consequences, because I'm long gone. It's my granddaughters that are going to suffer these consequences. All of you are going to suffer the consequences of this abysmal stupidity that we have in our leadership. And I say our leadership, I'm talking about the Congress, the executive, the military, the capitalist society that we're in. It's sick. These people are very sick in the head, certifiably sick. What more can I say? Now you know why I get pessimistic.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen New York Times editorials be like, should we nuke North Korea? Like, they never even put in the question is, why should anyone interfere? They're like, why can't we let them be? but it's always like why we should go to war. And you're absolutely right. Somebody commented that the US is the only country to use nuclear military weapons. Oh, and here's one last question. Other countries are not going to give up their nukes until the one that most likely uses it. Is that right?
No question. If we took the leadership, we got so many nukes and they're so interestingly distributed that what we could do is cut our arsenal in half. What's his name? The Secretary of Defense under Kennedy and Johnson.
McNamara
was asked, what could we cut the budget, the defense budget by without jeopardizing our security? He said 50%. So if we were to cut out the triad, the two legs of the triad, one, the Air Force with their cruise missiles, and the Army with their silos, and just leave out there. Now that would probably cut out 2/3 of the nukes that we have, or at least close to that. And we could do that unilaterally. But what a shock that would be to the rest of the nuclear countries that would incentivize them to also cut down on their nukes. And so once we get into a habit of each cutting down, we might have a chance of having what 150 nations, or maybe it's 140, have just signed on to the resolution for the nuclear powers to turn around and end their nuclear activity or capability. This is what the number of nations in the world have signed on to. And the United States, without embarrassment, wrote a letter to many of these nations saying that, look, withdraw your ascension to this. You know, it's really not a safe thing to do. It's not safe to cut down on nuclear. This is the United States government. And I got to tell you, it's not just the executive. It's not just Trump. We're talking about the Democrats, the Republicans, in the Congress. These are all people that are just walking with their eyes closed through the cemetery.
I don't want to keep you too long, but what you say is really, we absolutely agree. And we're definitely interested in having citizens like have the power to write their own laws, because you're the one who's like, Obama would never get evicted from a house, but so many citizens who in their heart know what it feels like to be scared and homeless, like I think they're going to write a lot more empathetic laws, in my opinion. Go ahead.
There's no question. If you equip the people, the general public, in fact, what I'm advocating is unreserved faith in the people. You got to believe that the people will act intelligently, and they will, given the proper procedures, given the proper rules. They'll act extremely intelligently because they'll be acting exactly the way the elites act, in their self-interest. It's in their self-interest to have proper housing, have proper health care, to be at peace, to have employment. These are laws. Boy, I'll tell you, when you buy the book, you'll see in chapter, I believe it's chapter 5, all of the possibilities of things that you could enact into law overnight. In the first year, you could do all this and then restructure representative government at the same time. So put this in the hands of the people with proper procedures. And now for this to succeed, here's what has to happen. One, you have to understand your power as a citizen. And that's very well explained in the book, addressing both the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And then in addition to then understanding the power that you have as a sovereign, now you have to buy into the experience of voting to enact this amendment to the Constitution and this Legislative Procedures Act in a national election conducted by Philadelphia 2, a group of voluntary citizens where the government doesn't have one iota of influence in this electoral process. And once the people have voted in a standard, which is the number of people who voted in the last presidential election, vote in the majority for this legislation, it becomes the law of the land, and we proceed to organize. And then we appropriate the money for this in the constitutional amendment. We say that whatever money you're spending on the present Congress, you should turn that over annually to the people's legislature for its operation. This may sound like a dream, but it's not. It's factual. I've backed this up with constitutional and logical language. So it's not pie in the sky. What's pie in the sky is to be able to persuade enough people, millions of people, to one, read the book, understand their powers, and act on their powers. That's what's the difficult part of it. The work is done, and we didn't compromise on any aspect of the Constitutional Amendment or the Legislative Procedures Act. It's all there, written out in detail. All you got to do is implement it, and you begin to implement it by enacting it into law. It's all there.
Well, I mean, we would be very interested, and yeah, I think we should probably have a lot of different, like, do at least like work on the propaganda for people to understand how much power they have. And thank you, and we don't want to. Thank you so much, Senator. This has been an honor to have you, and thank you for everything you've done to end the war.
Pleasure's mine. Let me tell you where your power comes from. It doesn't come from somebody writing a constitution. It doesn't come from any piece of paper. Your sovereignty comes from birth. When you are born, you are sovereign, and you're guided to adulthood by your parents or surrogates. And you are sovereign as a human being because you are a human being. Got nothing to do with the government.
And a lot of us are treated just like commodities, but you're right. We have to remember that each one of us is human who deserves just as much as that they take from us. And
you're right. And I appreciate you having me on. And I would hope that each one of you would get a copy of the book. Like I say, I started publishing it with Author House, and I was very unhappy with them. And so I then republished it with Go To Publish. And that's about a month or so away from getting on the shelf. But once it's on the shelf, I hope you'll go out of your way to get it. You can get an ebook for $3, or you can get the soft cover for $13, $14. And if that's a problem, just contact me and I'll send you the electronic version. We're not doing it for money. The money that comes in will be used to sell more copies of the book. The name of the game is for people to understand the power that they have and how it could be structured into the utilization and creation of a legislature of the people, where they can individually or collectively make laws that govern their lives.
Absolutely. Then thank you so much. And we will absolutely get our book, and we even have a reading group. And so your book will be on the
group. Here's what I would challenge you. You got a reading group, and have them get the copy of the book and read it. And then I'll get on the tube with you and discuss it with you. And you could then go into details of the book. My wife belongs to 2 reading clubs, and so I don't, but I know how they're operated. And so you people read the book, underline what you'd have questions about, and then let's go at it for an hour or more. So that's an open invitation. All you got to do is contact me, and you know how to do that. So that's the challenge I leave with you at this point in time. And like I say, if the cost of the book is excessive, let me know and I'll get it to you without cost. Thank you.